Looking for NFL football? Stop right here. You found your home for weekly NFL talk and fantasy football. Coming to you live from the BackupPunter.com. This is the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, here's your host, the man who thinks fullbacks win championships, Keegan Matheson.
The man does not lie. This is the Backup Punter Podcast, episode number 11. My name's Keegan Matheson, here with you again. Thank you for joining, and thank you to Music Radio Creative. Hooked me up with that new intro. I really like it. Let me know what you think. This is episode 11. Today we're going to talk about women in the NFL. What role do they play? What role does the league want them to play? There's a lot to talk about here. I really want to dig into that. Then later on in the show, because by the midpoint of the show I'm probably going to be a bit angry, later in the show, we'll talk about fantasy football quarterbacks. I'm going to give you my top 10, a couple to watch for, but it's that time of year where we can look forward to fantasy football, finally. So we'll talk about that. Now, as always, the Backup Punter Podcast is brought to you by DynastySportsEmpire.com. So whether you're checking out NFL, NBA, NHL, MLB, check them out for your fantasy sports needs. Follow them right now on DSE_football. Get yourself into a Dynasty Fantasy League today, for Fantasy Football League today. Now, the leagues start at $50. I promise you it's 50 times more fun than the free leagues that you and I are going to talk about. Check them out. And as always, follow along on Twitter, at the Backup Punter. Check out the BackupPunter.com. Like the page on YouTube, subscribe on iTunes, type it into something, click buttons. You know the drill. Now, right off the top, I want to talk about this issue, women in the NFL. Their role as consumer, contributor to the NFL picture. But I want to take the long road to my conversation because I want you to know where my mind is. I want you to know why this came up. Because women in the NFL, it hasn't been newsworthy this week. But there's been 4 specific things that were newsworthy that led my mind to the point it's at right now. And I'm going to run you through those 4 things that were in the news this week that led me to this point. And they're all worthy of their own discussion, and they're all a bit frustrating. Now, first off, Adrian Peterson. Adrian Peterson, as we all know, he was suspended last year because he abused a child. He beat his kid with a stick. No matter how many people online you see saying, oh, he just needs to, when I was young, my parents did that and it was fine. Shut up. This is 2015. Adrian Peterson beat his 4-year-old kid with a stick, yet he was paid $11.75 million. $11.75 million not to play football last year. Every week, he received a check for $691,175 to sit on his couch, not because he'd done a great deed and he was being rewarded, but because he'd beat his kid and he was suspended. And the NFL lacked the proper plan to deal with that. Well, now in 2015, the Minnesota Vikings have welcomed him back. We'll say they've welcomed him back. It hasn't been red carpet. It hasn't been open arms. But after what he put the team through last year, it shouldn't be. The fact they're welcoming him back, in my opinion, is enough. He's due to make $12.75 million raise. Everything was seeming okay for Peterson to come. There's been so much trade speculation he doesn't want to come back. He's kicking and screaming. Because personally, I can't imagine a fate worse than being paid $12.75 million to play 16 games of football. I wake up in the night sweating thinking about that. That's a nightmare. That's a nightmare. I have 2 fears. Heights and getting paid billions of dollars to play football. Now this week, Adrian Peterson went on a Twitter rant. And the basis of his Twitter, I'd read it to you now, but it just frustrates me too much. The basis of his Twitter rant is that contracts are too one-sided. NFL players don't get enough guaranteed money. And, for those of you who really aren't up to date with contracts, because a lot of people find that boring. For example, if a player signs a deal for 2 years and $10 million, that deal might only have $5 million guaranteed in the first year. So what it really is the first year is 1 year, $5 million guaranteed he gets no matter what. But that second year, that second $5 million is Just kind of, if we still want you. And the team can wash their hands of that player without much penalty financially. That's what Adrian Peterson's getting at, because he wants his contract guaranteed now. He doesn't have enough guarantees. His worry is that the Vikings can cut him because they're in a position where it won't really punish them that much. Well, this isn't an issue with the Vikings. This is an issue with the NFLPA, with the bargaining agreement, the CBA. But for Adrian Peterson, of all people, one of the highest paid players in the league, if he's not the highest paid in history at running back, he's close. At 30 years old, to be complaining about this, coming back from a year-long suspension for child abuse, using a switch, which is a stick for those of you who don't know. I don't understand it. Let me know if I'm in the wrong here. If you think that's crazy, if you think he's got a table to stand on, even if that table's just got one leg, let me know. Now, if this was a clean franchise, if this was Matt Ryan, somebody like that, somebody who doesn't make a bad headline, they just do their work, do it well, they're the face of the franchise, okay, let's have a conversation. In Adrian Peterson's situation, I don't know what you're talking about. That's number one. Number two is Ray McDonald, formerly of the San Francisco 49ers, recently of the Chicago Bears. This guy doesn't deserve to be paid $1 to sweep a street, let alone be paid money to play in the NFL. Now, last May 25th of 2014, police were called to his house for a domestic dispute. Apparently, the woman he was in the dispute with had taken out one of his guns because she was fearing him. Murky details. That was the first incident. August 31st, right before the season, he was arrested for domestic violence. No charges ended up being filed, but it sounded ugly. In December, right before he was released by the 49ers, there were sexual assault allegations. This is all in the same year. All in the same year. Sexual assault allegations, so he was cut by the 49ers. Now the Chicago Bears ride in and they say, you know what? This guy's worth it. Let's sign him. So they sign Ray McDonald. I don't understand it. It's not like this guy is a dominant player. He's a good player, football player, terrible person, decent football player. But it's not like the Chicago Bears needed to sign Ray McDonald. There wasn't another team lining up right behind them about to pull the trigger. This guy's toxic. This guy's a cancer. And it's led to a lot of discussion about, should a team be punished for signing a player like this? That's been a hot topic this week. I don't know if you can do that, because that opens up a blank slate without any precedent. And how strange would that be? Say if someone like Greg Hardy was a free agent. Well, you can sign Greg Hardy, but you have to forfeit $1 million. You have to forfeit a third-round pick. How do you start that? How do you enforce it? I don't think that'll happen. The penalty should be a fan base that's pissed off because you just signed someone that's accused of domestic assault, accused of sexual assault. That should be the penalty. People should scream more. People should break things. If I'm a Chicago Bears fan, I'm upset. Because after the Chicago Bears signed him, last week, May 25th, arrested for domestic violence and child endangerment. The woman who he was domestically assaulting was holding a young child. So he's arrested 2 days later. Again, last week, 2 days later, he's arrested for breaking his, the terms of his release or parole or one. He's arrested again. So that's 5 times in a year the guy's been arrested. If he sniffs a football job again, I quit. He can't. That's not right. So that is the second thing that got me thinking down my road to women in the NFL this week. Number 3 is Colin Kaepernick, quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. The Niners are coming up a lot here. That's a good sign for you Niners fans. Now, Colin Kaepernick, a lot of people hate Colin Kaepernick because they hate Colin Kaepernick, the person, the image he gives off. Now, he is the franchise quarterback of the Niners. When you think franchise quarterback, you think Peyton Manning. You think Aaron Rodgers, Andrew Luck, just kind of wearing a suit after the game instead of Colin Kaepernick, who shows up with a a flat-beaked hat and big headphones and a hoodie. And there's a professionalism that he's lacking. Well, do I care about that? Not really. If he shows up naked with a parrot on his shoulder, that's fine, as long as he's a good human being. Be a good human being off the field, be a good football player on the field. Those are the two criteria I have for football players. Good on, good off. Well, he made a bonehead, I won't even call it a mistake, because a mistake is something you can do by accident. He did something stupid this week. The flooding that's going on in the Houston area down through Texas, if you haven't stayed up to date with that, especially, a lot of my listeners are Canadian, I know, check it out. It's insane, the flooding they're getting around the Houston area. Colin Kaepernick tweets out a picture of a line of cars, which I assume was on a highway, a residential road, trying to get out of the flooded area. And these cars were clearly just abandoned. Water was up over the hoods. Some of them were almost fully submerged. And he sent out this picture. I think I said tweeted, sorry, it was an Instagram picture. I guess you say he Instagrammed it. I suppose that's the word. I need to get a little more hip sometime these days. But the caption was, I warned you, hashtag storms coming, hashtag Houston. In storms coming, he substituted the letter S with the number 7, which is his thing. He calls himself the Storm, substitutes the S with a 7, which is his jersey number. His grasp on English upsets me at a cellular level, but that's something for another day. What the hell are you doing? He came back, 2 minutes later, he tweeted out a picture of himself shirtless with some generic slogan that athletes, here grinding, here, working every day. Good for you. Congratulations. And then a little bit later, tweeted out an apology saying, I didn't fully understand what was going on. Well, if you know there's a flood in Houston and you're Instagramming a picture of abandoned cars, I think it's pretty bad. Don't make light of it. Don't use it as an agenda to push a bad nickname that you made up for yourself. Things like this about Colin Kaepernick are what worry me. He's got all the physical talents in the world. If you put on the tape of him running the Green Bay Packers into the ground a couple years ago, one of the most dominant performances I've seen in any sport in the last 10 years. It was obscene. It was playing a video game on easy. It was an adult playing in a Pop Warner League. But stuff like this, I don't mind the look he has at the podium after games. I don't mind that he's not the most likable personality. It bugs me, but whatever. When he does this, it makes the rest of that look 20 times worse. It magnifies it. What was he doing there? That's number 3. And number 4, this one just... Prince Shembo of the Atlanta Falcons. Now, he was a 4th-round pick of them last year. Linebacker. Now, at Notre Dame in 2010, Prince Shembo was accused, keyword here, accused, only accused, of sexual assault against a woman named Lizzie Steinberg, who later committed suicide because of this sexual assault. Now, you can do reading on it yourself. It's a very touchy subject. He was accused in it. He was, investigated. What came of it completely, to what extent, I'm not sure, but he was involved in that. That's something that he had to reveal to teams at the NFL Scouting Combine. And it did hurt his draft stock. It was a real red flag. Hadn't heard a word of him until this week. I don't know what's in the water this week. All 4 of these things this week. On Friday, Prince Shembo was arrested for killing his girlfriend's dog. Now, the number one thing you keep in mind here, this is the Atlanta Falcons. Michael Vick, when he was arrested for his dogfighting scheme, which is the most gruesome, horrific thing. People have lost sight of how horrific that Michael Vick situation was. That was, I don't want you. I often tell people on the podcast, go read this, go check it out for yourself, form an opinion on this, educate yourself on this, because it's interesting. I'm not going to say that about Mike Vick. Don't go look at that. It's terrible. But this is the same franchise. Same type of thing. Now, Prince Shembo's lawyer came out and said that it was an act of self-defense, that he was bitten by the dog, so he kicked it just out of reaction, out of fear, and that the dog died, and that Shembo was heartbroken, crying. And I saw that in the title of an article. So I clicked on the article and I said, you know what? Let's not be close-minded. Let's not be completely, make up my mind and run away with the idea. Let's see what this says. The dog was a Yorkie. I can fit a Yorkie in my pocket. I researched Yorkies today. Yorkies are between 4 and 7 pounds. This is an NFL linebacker. Linebacker. This dog couldn't reach its ankle with a stepladder. So Prince Shembo was number 4, followed by Adrian Peterson, Ray McDonald, and Colin Kaepernick. And this leads us up to why I got thinking about women in the NFL. So thank you, first of all, for coming the long road with me, because I wanted to set the table and tell you what got me thinking. This isn't just an idea that I pulled out of the air to rag on. Over the weekend, I was thinking about this and thinking about, through this whole season, there's been Greg Hardy, there's been Ray Rice, just these incident after incident that are just terrible. And I feel like every week on the podcast, we're talking about something negative like this. And I don't like that. I want to talk about fantasy football with you. I want to argue about who the 7th best running back is, who the 35th best receiver is. That's what I love. But this stuff it's bigger than all of that. And this weekend I was thinking about, why does this stuff keep happening? When are people going to clue in? I'm not asking you to be Gandhi. I'm not asking you to be the most likable person in the world. You don't need to be Ellen DeGeneres. You don't need to be just this undeniable source of charisma. You just need to be a decent human being. Why are NFL players consistently falling short? Why are NFL franchises consistently falling short of getting quality people? The only answer I could come up with is, where are the women in the NFL? I think the people that can fix this league are women. Are strong women, are powerful women, are intelligent women, of which there are endless options. The people that can fix this league are mothers, wives, grandmothers. Prince Shembo needs a woman to talk to him right now and tell him, what are you doing? Ray McDonald needs a woman to talk to him and tell him, this is wrong. This is repeated. This is chronic. Adrian Peterson needs a mother to talk to him. A mother of a young child to talk to him and tell him this is wrong. The fact that you were just paid $11.75 million to sit at home after doing this to a child, that's wrong. And it got me thinking of just women in the NFL, how they are portrayed. And the way I want to discuss this is, when you turn on an NFL game, if you read about the NFL, if you talk about the NFL, how are women portrayed? How do you see women? Well, one of the first thing a lot of you are going to click to is cheerleaders. Cheerleaders on the sideline, dancing at NFL games. Well, let's talk about cheerleaders in the NFL. If you are a cheerleader for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, you do not work for the Buccaneers, and you do not work for the team. And the teams really make that clear. You work for a third-party company that the Buccaneers hire. Because of this, cheerleaders are criminally underpaid. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers were hit with a lawsuit recently because they were paying their cheerleaders $100 a game. Now, that would be okay if it was just for the 3-hour game, but that's $100 per game, preparing for it through the week. Everything that goes into that. Now, cheerleaders, it might just look like fun dancing, but they don't just show up and freestyle. They practice. What do you call it when you dance? You rehearse. They rehearse through the week. Before that lawsuit, the Oakland Raiders were paying their cheerleaders $5 an hour. They've had to up that to minimum wage. Wow. They upped it all the way to minimum wage after that lawsuit. The Buffalo Bills did away with their cheerleading team completely because of this. They were being treated like aliens on the team. They were not being treated like employees of the team because as far as the organization was concerned, they weren't. They were pretty faces to put butts in seats. That's what they did. They did it for cheap. So don't allow the NFL to fool you into thinking these cheerleaders are treated well and flown first class. Just because they're put on camera before and after commercials doesn't mean it's good. Now, one woman you will be seeing on the field in 2015, Sarah Thomas. And this is exciting because Sarah Thomas is the first ever full-time NFL official. That is a woman. 2015 will be her first year. She's coming from college football. By all accounts, fantastic referee that is well worth this spot. As a human being, it's not a woman being a referee. This is a referee who earned a job. Period. But the NFL would like you to see this as a great step forward for gender equality in football. While it's a fantastic thing, don't let this fool you into thinking that women have this great role within the NFL world. It's 2015. This should have happened 20 years ago. Having the first woman to get a job in the NFL in the year 2015. Don't let the league fool you into thinking that's progress. Now it is, but it's horrifically overdue progress. And it's a bit ridiculous. Some other women you'll see when you watch a football game are sideline reporters. Think of the big ones who would be Pam Oliver, Erin Andrews, women like that on the sideline. Intelligent women, capable of analysis, capable of investigating, of interviewing, of explaining. Very intelligent sports minds. But what do? They interview the coach as he runs off the field. How do you feel about that half? What do you have to do in the second half? Or they'll interview a player. So, you've been playing well lately. Do you think you should keep doing those things? Well, yes, I do. Well, thank you for your interview. They are avenues for the players to speak, for the coaches to speak. When one of these women is on a panel, on one of the pregame shows, postgame, halftime shows, they're not an analyst. They're treated as a mediator. They pass off between ex-players, ex-coaches, who really don't interest me that much when they do speak. But the woman on the panel is just treated as someone who passes off between them. The women are being tweeted, I've talked about Twitter too much this show, are being treated as a consumer group, a consumer of products, not of football. Now, women make up over 40% of NFL fans. But a lot of what you see, you'll see the commercials for jerseys with pink numbers. Well, fantastic. The one that really gets me, and this is I like to use a small example to highlight a big issue. In the NFL, it's deeply ingrained, and I hesitate to call it sexism. I'm not sure. I guess it is. It's deeply rooted that it's become subtle to people like you and I who have watched this league for 20, 30, 40 years, a lot of you. The one thing I point to is a fantasy football commercial. I think it's an NFL.com fantasy football commercial. And it's one that they put out at the end of last year, I think the end of seasons before it too, for people to join playoff fantasy football teams. And the premise of the commercial, it's supposed to be funny. It shows people who their fantasy football team went 1-12 or 0-13. And the music in the background is sad. It shows them crying, and it'll show their team name. So it'll be a guy standing on a treadmill, and it'll say, Barry's Bruisers, 0-13. And it'll cut to another guy. And it's all these normal things. And then it cuts to a blonde woman sitting in a convertible wearing a pink jersey. Her team name is Romo-licious, insinuating that Tony Romo is delicious. And when I see that, I think, are you serious? That's how the NFL views female consumers. As someone who might want to go to the game with their husband, with their boyfriend, and buy a pink jersey, and laugh at the game on the field, and not really understand it. Which is idiotic, which is archaic. It's an idea that has just grown with the NFL over the years. The NFL doesn't treat female fans like they treat a male fan. And by male fan, I mean regular. In the NFL's mind, a woman doesn't just sit down and watch a football game and enjoy it, which millions and millions do. So there's all of these subtle things. And when you watch it on your TV, whether it's the cheerleaders, whether it's reporters being stuck on sideline duty, ask yourself, when's the last time you saw a man do that sideline reporting? You'll see guys that'll do analysis from the sidelines, but when's the last time you saw a guy chasing the coach off the field to get that interview? It's been a while. And it becomes so deeply ingrained that we mistake it for being normal. Now, one thing I want you to do here, I feel like I'm not a magician, what am I trying to say? I can't think of the word. Illusionist, something. But clear your mind. Make your mind go black just for a second, because I'm going to ask you to think of something to picture it. The word I was looking for was hypnotist. I feel like a hypnotist right now. But think of an NFL referee. Subconsciously, 99% of you just thought of a middle-aged white male. Doesn't make you racist, doesn't make you sexist. I did the same thing. But that's just an example of, that's what we see as normal. So we don't think about it. We just say, oh, that's a referee. That's what the referee looks like. Good. One suggestion I have for this, because if we're going to talk about problems on this show, one of my pet peeves is when people just bash on something. When people will say, oh, such and such he's a crappy quarterback. Well, okay, that's an inch deep. Your statement is an inch deep. Why is he bad? What can he do to be better? If we're going to talk about this, let's talk about what can be done to make it better. What I look to is the Rooney Rule. For those of you who don't understand, the Rooney Rule came into the league in 2003, and it states that when an NFL team has a vacant head coaching position, when they're looking to hire a coach, they need to interview at least one minority candidate. And that's because before 2003, there were not a lot of black head coaches. And when I say not a lot, I mean single digits, ever. And it's been a huge help. Sometimes it can get awkward because you'll know a team has their guy, but late in the process they'll bring in a black candidate to interview. It can produce awkward situations like that, which is why it does have its critics. But the rule itself has its heart in the right place. I think the NFL needs something like this for women. And I don't mean in head coaching, because the atmosphere around football hasn't exactly promoted women as football coaches, so there aren't many, quite frankly. But why not have a rule like this to promote women being hired into front office management roles, into top-level HR or public outreach or player management roles, both on teams and in the NFL? Because if I'm going back to the 4 reasons that got me to thinking about women in the NFL this week, Adrian Peterson, Prince Shembo, Ray McDonald, Colin Kaepernick, they need someone to smarten them up. So far, the NFL has been a league by men, with men, for men. It hasn't worked. It just hasn't worked. And this past week, with 4 more things for me to harp on, shows you that it's not getting fixed. Something needs to change, and that's a fresh look, and that's a fresh presence. There need to be mothers making decisions in the NFL. Grandmothers, wives, sisters. Women need to have a say in the NFL, because more often than not, that woman is going to clean up the mess that a man made while he was being an idiot. That's how it works. Thank God women are here to save us from ourselves. Hopefully the NFL will realize that and allow women to play a bigger role in the league. They need to. I think it can help. The thought I want to leave you with, then we'll move on to fantasy football quarterbacks. I know that's where you want to get, but I've got to finish this off by asking you this. Think of, if you're my age, if you're in your 20s or so, think of if you're watching an NFL game with a female friend who isn't into football. She says, okay, I'll watch the game with you, but I don't really understand. Either that, or if you're 30 or 40, or even older. If you have a daughter, a granddaughter, you're sitting on the couch Sunday afternoon, watching your Broncos play, and your daughter jumps on the couch. When she sees women on the TV, she's going to see cheerleaders dancing around in, I don't know, what are they, glorified bikinis and cowboy boots for spare change. They're going to see sideline reporters that are just acting as accessories to the male analysts back in the studio. They're going to see one female referee, I hope, but that's not enough. So after a quick break, we'll come back and we will get into fantasy football quarterbacks. I've got a top 10 list and a couple to watch for. I know it's almost draft time. I know you're chomping at the bit to get back into fantasy, so we'll get into that in depth. Okay, so when we get into the fantasy quarterbacks, fantasy football quarterbacks don't get enough talk. Everyone's really excited about running backs, wide receivers. People seem to just, and it's because people can draft one quarterback, plug him in, and play him for the year. Pick up one guy to fill a bye week, but if you're going to get a top guy, a Roethlisberger, a Rodgers, someone like that, you're going to stick him on your roster. That's the last you'll see of him. Just since we don't talk about them very often, doesn't mean they're not important. They're going to produce the most points on your roster. And I think people undervalue getting a great quarterback. So I'm going to give you my top 10 here. I'm going to give you a couple reasons for each being in their place. But I want to hear from you. Which one do you think is going to jump out this year? Which quarterback is going to fall off? So reach out over Twitter. Check on Facebook too at the Backup Punter. Go to thebackupunter.com. When this episode's posted, you'll see it on YouTube as well. Let me know what you think. My number one quarterback here is Aaron Rodgers. And for all these quarterbacks, I'm going to look at what they did in 2014, and I'm going to think about, will that get better, or will that get worse? Or are they going to stay about the same? Well, Aaron Rodgers in 2014, 4,381 yards, 38 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. I watched every snap he took. 3 of those interceptions were right off the palms of his wide receivers. His offensive line is good. He has an extremely high floor. This guy's going to get you at least a very good amount of points every week. There's not going to be many games at all where you look at your scoreboard and you say, oh, I wish Aaron Rodgers had gotten me more points. That's not going to happen. He also adds, he might give you 2 or 3 rushing touchdowns through the year. Every week he might give you that extra 1.5, 2 points on the ground. That's so valuable. I love that stuff. Number 2, only an inch behind. You can pick Andrew Luck number 1. I won't blame you. I've got Andrew Luck number 2. Now, he's got Andre Johnson coming in, Frank Gore, Philip Dorsett. Now, Johnson and Gore, they're a little bit up there. Dorsett's a rookie. None of these guys are going to win the MVP, but they make the Colts better. My issue with Andrew Luck is we talk about him like he's the golden boy. Robert Griffin III was picked right after him. He's been a bit of a garbage fire so far. But Andrew Luck, we see him as the perfect young franchise quarterback, which he really is, but he's not without flaw. Last year, 16 interceptions. He fumbled the ball 13 times. Unless those numbers come down a lot, you're going to have a couple games where he torpedoes his own value, where he'll put up 400 yards, but throw, 3 picks to go along with his 3 touchdowns. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're looking for counting stats, Andrew Luck he's a beast. He's a man among boys. It's going to be tough to beat him. If Aaron Rodgers does top Andrew Luck, it's not going to be by 100 points. It'll be by a few. So he's my number 2. Young, great offense, nothing not to like. Number 3, I've got Russell Wilson. The more I thought of it, I started out thinking he might be a 4-5-6 guy. But he has a lot to gain this season. Contract looming. 2014, he had 3,475 yards, 20 touchdowns throwing. I think that's going to go up this year. 7 interceptions, so that's not enough to kill you any week. 849 rush yards and 6 touchdowns. That's some big numbers on the ground. That's a running back that you'd almost want to roster. I don't think he's going to touch those numbers this year, but he could still very well put up the 650 with 5 touchdowns. He's got Jimmy Graham, Tyler Lockett. That's going to help him be very efficient over the middle. That's going to bring coverage in over the middle a little bit more. Open stuff up for Curse, for Baldwin. Marshawn Lynch, even if he does hit the wall, Marshawn Lynch hitting the wall is still better than half the running backs in this league. Next year, if Marshawn Lynch retires or leaves, then we have a conversation about Russell Wilson's fantasy value. This year, if you're taking him 3rd off the board, 3rd or 4th, I think that's perfect. Number 4, I have Ben Roethlisberger. Now, Roethlisberger last year, he really seemed to turn a corner mentally. Not that he was ever a dumb quarterback, but last year he had that calm veteran presence about him. Really read the field beautifully, and Le'Veon Bell helps that a lot. If you can dump off the Le'Veon Bell, I could probably put up a top 20 quarterback season. The guy's a beast. He's going to be without Bell for the first 3 games. That won't hurt. D'Angelo Williams will get them through at least. But last year he put up 4,952 through the air, 32 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. I think his TD-INT ratio will be right around that again. Those 9 interceptions, that's nice and clean. I think that Ben Roethlisberger is going to be a bit streaky. He's going to have those games where he almost pushes 500 yards. And then he'll get into a game or two where either it's raining or it's just going to be a Le'Veon Bell game. He might underwhelm you a little bit. But he's going to win you. He's going to win you more games than he's going to lose you, Ben Roethlisberger is. He's not hitting the age yet where he's going to regress at all. I like him a lot at number 4. Number 5, I've got Drew Brees here. There was this, however we got into the mindset that 2014 was just a terrible year for Drew Brees. Unfortunately, he's just set the bar so high. 5,000 yards here, 45 touchdowns. He's been such a statistical hoarder that when he puts up a regular season, we think, oh, God, Drew, what are you doing? But he was fine last year. 33 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. I expect that to drop. But the guy threw the football 659 times. That defense was bad. He was asked to pick up the slack. 659 throws. That's way too much. Now, he lost Jimmy Graham, lost Kenny Stills, but he's getting Brandon Cooks back, who I think is going to be one of the breakout players in this league this year. C.J. Spiller out of the backfield should give him that Reggie Bush type again. That's really going to pump some free yards into his wheelhouse. There's no reason Drew Brees cannot be a top 5 fantasy quarterback. The Saints are going to be a bubble team in the playoffs this year. Is that defense going to do enough? I really don't know. If you're a Drew Brees guy, that's a good thing. Sometimes a bad defense can be good for a quarterback you have in fantasy. You don't want your quarterback to get up 17-0 in the first 5 minutes. You want the games to be tight so they keep throwing the ball. So I like Drew Brees. If you got him 5th or 6th, good on you. Number 6 is a guy that I'm putting there because I think he's going to improve, not because of what he's done. That's Cam Newton. I love Cam Newton. Not as high on him as some people, but last year he had a tough year behind a very bad offensive line with some banged up running backs. Completed 58.5% of his passes, not good enough. 18 touchdowns through the air, also not good enough, but I think that's going to go up. 12 interceptions, I think he'll keep it around there, no higher, I don't think. On the ground, though, 539 rush yards, 5 touchdowns. That's all while being bruised, battered, broken, shattered, whatever word you can throw in there. He was a mess last year physically. He still went out and performed. Rumor has it he's about to get paid 5 years, 100 mil plus. It's a little motivation for you. Make yourself look worth it. Now, I really don't love the Devin Funchess pick, putting him across from Kelvin Benjamin. I see the appeal. everyone says it like it's this groundbreaking thing. Both of those receivers are tall. I know they are. Fantastic. Whatever. I hope they can both continue to separate, because the thinking is, well, Cam Newton misses high a lot. These guys are tall enough to catch. How often is that going to actually result in a completion that a 6'2" quick guy would not get? I don't know. I gotta see that to believe it. They need a third and fourth option. Greg Olsen, my boy, love Greg Olsen. He's gonna be huge over the middle. Hopefully Devin Funchess can surprise people. And hopefully he can separate. Regardless, if Cam Newton can do what he did last year on that offense, now this 2015 offensive line, I've said a couple times, if I'm Cam Newton, I bought life insurance yesterday. But I think he can put up, at least a top 8. But the potential's just so enticing there still going into his 5th year. I like Cam Newton at 6. Number 7, I'm going to give you Matt Ryan of the Falcons. Matt Ryan, last year, 4,694 yards, threw the ball a ton. 28 touchdowns, I think that'll go up. 14 interceptions, don't think he's going to do that bad again. Now, the defense is going to get him the ball a little bit more. Falcons' defense was just pitiful last year. They got stuck on the field, could not produce turnovers, couldn't get to the opposing quarterback. Tevin Coleman's going to help him out. Julio Jones, only going to get better. Roddy White still got some left in the tank. I think Matt Ryan is going to have a really good year. Matt Ryan's a good pick if you are going to chase some of these enticing running back, wide receiver, tight end options early. Come back a few rounds later, get yourself Matt Ryan. I'm a big believer in guys like Matt Ryan, like that, because you know what you're going to get. Matt Ryan's not going to torpedo you with a 5-point week. He may not put up a 50-point week by any means, but he's not going to kill you. And if you're buying really high on some skill position guys early, you probably need that calming force, like in Matt Ryan. Number 8, I have Tony Romo of the Cowboys. I don't think he's the 8th best quarterback in the league, maybe, but I do see a little fantasy upside for him this year. Now, last year, he wasn't really the quarterback of that offense. DeMarco Murray was. Ran the ball approximately 1 billion times. Tony Romo was 23rd in the league in passing attempts last year, which really surprised me. I knew it wasn't too high, but being 23rd in the league, he still threw 34 touchdowns, just 9 interceptions. Now, Jason Witten's getting a little older. Are there enough complementary receiving options, especially if they throw more? And if the focus isn't solely on the run game, who's going to run the football? Joseph Randall, Darren McFadden, who's it going to be? There's questions. But I think Tony Romo, at least has one more real good year. Just like Russell Wilson, how we might have to talk about him next year. We'll talk about Tony Romo next year. We'll see how his back is, see how his age is. But I think he's a fine option this year. Get him at the back end of your league. Number 9, I've got Peyton Manning. And it's a strange day in my life where I am ranking Peyton Manning the 9th best fantasy football quarterback. For the first half of the year, I think he's got every opportunity to be a top 5 quarterback. But there's no sense in having a top 5 quarterback for the first half of the year if he is going to fall off the face of the earth when it's your playoffs. That's something you really need to focus on with Peyton Manning. He had 15 interceptions last year. You're going to get tempted. Somebody in your league, especially if you're in more of a casual league, somebody in your league is going to say, oh, Peyton Manning. Hey, boys, look at me steal Peyton Manning. Well, the dude's 90. But if you get Peyton Manning, don't be afraid to bail on him late in the year. Ride him till you think he's out of bullets. But I'm really afraid that some people are going to draft Peyton Manning, get to week 10 or 11 or 12, and just be afraid to drop the big name. And I'm afraid he's going to drop off again. Especially if the running game can't win games single-handedly. So I've got Peyton Manning as my number 9. Number 10, my boy, you're sick of hearing of him. Right now you're thinking, Keegan, write the guy a letter. Get it out of your system. Spray some cologne on it. Get it over with. Ryan Tannehill. I think he's my breakout guy this year. Jordan Cameron, Kenny Stills, Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry. Out of the backfield, he's got Lamar Miller, Jay Ajayi, The weapons are there. He couldn't ask for another weapon. Mike Wallace is gone, which makes everyone happy. He's a bit of a clown. So last year he had 27 touchdowns. I think that's going to go up. 4,045 yards. I think that's going to go up. The Dolphins are going to be competitive this year, but they are not going to dominate, which is important. That means he's going to be throwing in quarters number 1, 2, 3, and 4. I don't think they're going to be blowing out anybody by 30 points. Tannehill is going to be chucking the ball. He's got options short, intermediate, long, and out of the backfield. If you are going to chase Le'Veon Bell and Alshon Jeffrey, Julio Jones, Matt Forte, guys like this early in your first couple rounds, please keep Ryan Tannehill in mind when you come back around. So the 1 through 10 go Rodgers, Luck, Wilson, Roethlisberger, Breeze, Newton, Ryan, Romo, Manning, Tannehill. Let me know what you think. Rankings online are all over the place. People turn it into a real arrogant thing too. How could you have this guy? If you get any of these 10 guys, you're happy in your draft. You've got one of the 10 best fantasy quarterbacks, in my opinion. A couple guys that aren't on the list. Tom Brady, not on the list. But it's not a knee-jerk reaction to a suspension. That's not it. Suspension, no suspension. He'd probably be my number 11. If I flipped him in for number 10, sure. I just don't feel comfortable with him on my fantasy team because there's going to be those weeks where Bill Belichick says, you know what, this is a LeGarrette Blount week. Oh, you know what, this is the week where I grab this 7th string obscure running back, make it all about him and win. And I don't see enough high ceiling potential from Brady. He doesn't throw that deep ball anymore. Now he's got Gronkowski, he has the weapons there. And he's a safe pick. If you're in a 12-team league, like most of you are, keep in mind that I only gave you 10 names here. If you're in a 12-team league, somebody will draft him. Now, if you're an East Coast guy like me, you're going to have a Patriots fan in your league who's going to draft him. And being a Patriots fan, they'll go on a big, I got Brady, boys. Come down to my place for some chowder. We'll go to the Red Sox game. Something like that. But don't be afraid to draft him. Hell, if you draft Tom Brady and then get Jimmy Garoppolo in the last round just to hold you over, I don't have a bad word to say to you. Again, especially if you're going high on skill position players. If you're going high on running backs, you're waiting for a quarterback, grab Brady. Not a high ceiling, but he'll do enough. He'll give you enough. Now, how about a couple sleepers here before I let you go? We're just about out of time here. Backup Punter Podcast, episode 11. Episode 11. One guy I'm going to look for is Teddy Bridgewater. Do I want to roster him from the start of the year? No, I don't. But he's a guy who I would keep my eye on if you have an injury. If you draft a guy like a Romo and he gets injured, or if you draft Peyton Manning and he falls off the face of the earth. Teddy Bridgewater. Because I think that offense is really going to take off, especially if Adrian Peterson gets over himself. I think Teddy Bridgewater can benefit from that. He's going to add some yards on the ground, too. Don't forget to keep an eye on Jameis Winston, Marcus Mariota. I don't know if the Titans are good enough to let Mariota have stats just yet, but if Jameis Winston shoots out of the gates, he's someone to keep an eye on. These are all guys you'll want to look for in your bye week as well. And then, of course, if you're in a 12-team league, if you miss these 10 or you don't like these 10 and you don't like Tom Brady, or your buddy already drafted Tom Brady and invited you for chowder, there are guys like Matt Stafford. I'll admit right here, I have had Matt Stafford on a lot of fantasy football teams. He's extremely frustrating. Wouldn't highly recommend it if you value your happiness, but hell, go for it. Phillip Rivers, he's relevant. He's absolutely fantasy relevant. There's a lot of guys like these who are in my 10 to 15 range who you can go for. And hell, if it all doesn't work out, just draft Jay Cutler and let it roll. So that's been it for episode number 11 of the Backup Punter Podcast. Now, things have been going great over here, and I thank you for taking the time to listen every week like you have been. The numbers have been fantastic. I'm really encouraged and deeply appreciative of your time. So head over to iTunes if you haven't already. hit subscribe. It'll come to you right when I put this live each and every week, because sometimes there's a bit of a delay as I get it up on the site on some other platforms. But you'll get it right to your iPhone, your iPad, your iHand, whatever I is doing right now. Also subscribe on Stitcher for Android. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check it out on Twitter. Check it out on Facebook. And send in your questions for next week, because next week will be a big one. I'm looking at the fantasy wide receiver group. Now, hopefully nothing dumb will happen in the next week, and we can just talk fantasy. But we'll see how that goes. I don't want to guarantee anything. So again, my name's been Keegan Matheson. This is episode number 11 of the Backup Punter Podcast. Hopefully all of your punts stop on the 1 yard line. Take care.